them all what I'm made up. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. We always like to jump into some fascinating topics, and today is no exception. We're talking about Donald Trump and this idea that he could potentially serve a third term as president.
Yeah.
Crazy, right?
It's a big one.
Yeah. So we're going to be digging into this recent interview he did on NBC, as reported by The Guardian.
Okay.
And we're going to be talking about the Constitution, presidential terms, and all the different ways he sort of hinted at getting around these rules.
Right.
So for our listeners out there, this is really about understanding those limits, those possibilities within the U.S. political system.
Absolutely. This is not just about one person, right? This is about how our government works.
Right.
At a fundamental level, it's really fascinating when you start to dig into all the legal interpretations and the political maneuvering.
Oh, yeah.
That comes into play when you're talking about something like this.
So let's get into it right in this NBC interview.
Yeah.
That The Guardian covered Trump. He didn't just, brush off the idea of a third term. He actually said that there were methods to make it happen. And he was very clear that he wasn't joking.
Right.
Now, he did add, these are methods, not concrete plans.
Sure.
And it's way too early to even think about this.
Yeah.
But the fact that he even brings this up is kind of significant, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think so.
Especially when he also mentioned that he really likes the work and he doesn't think the presidency is too much work.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. He's choosing his words very carefully.
Right.
Like when he says methods, he's hinting at these potential ways to do this within the rules as they exist, rather than just saying, I'm going to break the rules.
Yeah.
So it keeps the conversation going.
Right.
It allows for speculation. And when you combine that with him saying that he actually likes the job of being president, I think it's a pretty strong signal that he wants to stay in that position.
And this isn't totally out of the blue either.
Yeah.
The Guardian brought up some past things he said, like that Truth Social post where he compared himself to a king after some executive order in New York.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then there was that whole thing with the White House sharing a picture of him with a crown on a fake Time magazine cover.
I saw that too.
Whether he was joking or not, it definitely plays into this idea of, unlimited power.
Well, yeah, and what's interesting is that it plays into this feeling among some people for a leader who isn't held back by the usual limits.
Yeah.
The king analogy, even if he's being sarcastic, it directly goes against this idea of term limits that's so central to how our democracy works.
So let's get down to what are these methods he could be talking about.
Okay.
In the interview, NBC talked about this one scenario where Trump runs for vice president in 2028.
Okay.
Maybe with someone like J.D. Vance as the presidential candidate.
Right.
The idea is that Vance will resign after taking office, and then, boom, Trump becomes president.
Like a chess move.
Yeah.
It really is. And this whole thing relies on a very specific way of reading the 22nd Amendment, which is the part of the Constitution that sets term limits for presidents.
Right.
They're saying that the amendment only stops someone from being elected to the presidency more than twice.
Okay.
So the loophole is if you become president without being elected to a third term, like through this succession thing,
Right.
maybe it doesn't count as breaking that rule.
But The Guardian also pointed out that not everyone agrees with this theory, right?
Right.
They spoke to Derek Muller, a law professor at Notre Dame who specializes in election law, and he has a totally different view based on the 12th Amendment.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting how all these amendments connect.
Yeah.
Mueller focuses on that part of the 12th Amendment that says, if you can't be president for whatever reason, you also can't be vice president.
Right.
It's pretty straightforward if the 22nd Amendment says you can't be elected president for a third term.
Yeah.
Then you can't be vice president either.
Yeah.
Because that could lead to you becoming president.
Right.
So you can't just sidestep the rules for the top job by going for the number 2 spot.
So basically Mueller is saying there's no sneaky way around those term limits through this VP idea.
Exactly. He thinks the Constitution is designed to prevent that kind of maneuver.
Right.
I mean, his interpretation really highlights the goal of the 22nd Amendment, which is to stop one person from having too much power for too long.
Yeah.
Letting someone become president by first being VP would totally undermine the whole point of the amendment.
Right.
It's like this, the Constitution lays out the rules for who can be president.
Yeah.
The 12th Amendment is there to make sure you can't just bypass those rules by using a different office.
Now, The Guardian also mentioned some reactions from politicians about this whole thing.
Okay.
Republican Representative Andy Ogles, for example, he's actually suggested a constitutional amendment to allow presidents to serve 3 terms.
Wow.
But only if they aren't in a row.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is that The Guardian pointed out that Trump would be the only living president who could actually take advantage of this right now.
Right, like it's tailor-made for him.
Yeah, it is, and it shows how political ideas and constitutional law can get all mixed up.
Yeah.
Ogles is talking about this as a change for all future presidents.
Right.
But in reality, the only person it would affect right now is Trump.
That's true. But changing the Constitution is a huge deal.
Oh, yeah.
You need 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to even propose an amendment, and then 3/4 of all the states have to agree to it.
Right.
It's not easy to do.
No. And with the way things are in politics right now, it doesn't seem likely to happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there.
And it's worth noting that not every Republican is on board with this idea either.
Right.
The Guardian mentioned Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin, who said straight up that he wouldn't support what he sees as an unconstitutional third term.
Right.
He thinks that any changes to the Constitution should only happen through the official amendment process.
Right.
Which means it has to reflect what the American people want.
So even within the same party, you have people who see this very differently. And it shows a real respect for the Constitution and for limiting the power of the president.
And this brings us back to why the 22nd Amendment was created in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, the Guardian briefly mentioned, it came about after Franklin D. Roosevelt served 4 terms.
FDR, right? Yeah, that was a long time.
It was. And, he was president during some really tough times for America.
Yeah.
But it made people think about the risks of a president staying in power for too long.
Sure.
So the 22nd Amendment, which was put into place in 1951,
Okay.
basically made the 2-term tradition official.
Yeah.
George Washington started that tradition, but it wasn't a law before.
Right.
It's all about making sure that power changes hands regularly and that no one person becomes too powerful.
That makes sense.
So let's sum this all up for our listeners.
Okay.
Donald Trump has definitely brought up the possibility of a third term.
Yeah.
And he's talked about different ways to make it happen.
Right.
Including this VP scenario.
Right.
But there are some big roadblocks here. Legally, the 12th Amendment, according to experts, makes this VP loophole pretty unlikely.
Right.
And politically, while some people might be open to changing the rules on term limits,
Yeah.
it's incredibly difficult to actually amend the Constitution.
Yeah.
And there's no real agreement on whether this is a good idea.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have people who really want to see Trump back in office.
Right.
But then you have these constitutional limits on how long someone can be president.
Right.
And those limits were put in place for a reason.
Exactly. It's all about the balance of power and the principles of our democracy.
It really makes you think, right? What are the most important things to consider when we're talking about how long a president can stay in power?
Right.
Do we listen to the people who want a specific person in office?
Yeah.
Or do we stick to the Constitution and these safeguards that are supposed to stop anyone from having too much power for too long?
Right.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's a question that's been around for a long time in American history.
Yeah.
And it's one we're still grappling with today.
Yeah, definitely food for thought for our listeners.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall.